The Kaden Proctor announcement wait continues. We will talk Iowa football as we always do every Tuesday with you for the next 60 minutes. Leave those comments and questions in the live chat for Hawkeyes Live. And the guy that makes it work each and every week for us is, of course, Corey Bratta. Check out his work on From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how you doing today?
Doing wonderful. It was a good day yesterday. Had an enjoyable show talking recruiting, so I'm glad to kind of carry that over into another hour today. This is a big weekend, or I should say week post weekend. A lot of recruiting news and speculation that we can take part in. I know we're going to preview Ohio State in that game as well. This is a fun weekend, or a fun week, I should say, in response to a busy weekend. You determine what we start with, Mark, because there were a number of recruits on. We certainly had a good news on Sunday night with the commitment of Trevor Lauck, but whatever you want to start with.
Sure. Let's start right there. We're talking about the second-rated player in the class thus far with 13 commits. The offensive tackle out of Indianapolis, 33rd rated player at his position, 5th rated player in the state of Indiana, top 400 player. Yes, made his announcement on Sunday. So with the Kaden Proctor wait going on, Iowa slips in with another solid offensive tackle prospect.
Somebody's going to have to play guard. All right. So assuming these guys so Iowa's guys, you know, Mark, in 2021, and I talked about this last night, and I've given it more thought today. I actually had a conversation with Don Patterson about it this morning as well. But you look at what Iowa did in 2021, really strong class. All right. So you have David Davidkov, who I believe to be a true tackle. Connor Colby, who I perceive to be a tackle, although he's lining up at guard at 6'6", nearly 300 pounds. Sounds like Iowa wants to keep him at guard, which is okay. If they like him there, that's fine. But I do believe they're strong personnel-wise right now on the offensive line, at least from an recruiting evaluation standpoint. You look at 2022, the class, both tackles that they brought in this year or bringing in this year did not enroll early. That's Cale Crow from just south of me here, names down in Huxley. So he's like 6'7", 6'6", 6'7", big kid, a little thinner than maybe a Lauck or certainly Proctor, who's around 335. But he's a true tackle, and I've been told that. Not only have I seen that on tape, but I remember talking to Cale about this when he committed and signed, and he basically said as much. He's a tackle. That's what he is. So I don't know that there's going to be a lot of movement there. Certainly a lot of these guys, or I shouldn't say a lot of them, but it is possible that some of them could get moved to the other side of the ball at some point in their career. We've talked about that with Cannon Leonard, the big 6'9" tackle that committed a week ago. But Cale Crow's a true tackle. Jack Dotzler, 6'7", coming in this year. That's a tackle, all right? He's very similar in stature to Cale Crow. So you have two perceived to me as true tackles coming in this year, did not enroll early, so I think they're both going to be projects. And then you look at the 2023 class. You've got Proctor at the top of your board, top of everybody's board right now. You get him. He ain't playing guard. He's a tackle at 6'7", 6'8", 335, and he's playing, I believe, from day one. We talked about that last week. And now you get Trevor Lauck in there at 6'6", 287. So maybe Trevor Lauck ends up being a guard, but he's 6'6", 287 before he even sets foot on campus and before he even begins his senior year of high school football. So that's a big boy. And so the question is, how much movement will there be? If they can land all these guys, assuming they get Proctor, which is a big assumption to make at this point, but assuming they do, it creates an interesting discussion. And competition's never a bad thing, but certainly with the era of the transfer portal, you wonder, will they be able to hang on to all these guys? And will some of these guys be okay moving on the interior? So far, Connor Colby has done it. And let's be honest, I mean, guys have found success in the league. Look at Brandon Sheriff. This is actually a point that Don Patterson brought up to me this morning. Brandon Sheriff was a tackle at Iowa and a dominant one, and yet he is one of the highest paid players in the league at guard. So, I mean, it's not like it's impossible to make a great living on the interior of the offensive line. But the other thing about this is not only were Lauck and Proctor both on campus for visits this past weekend, but you also have Logan Howland, who's a 6'7", 280-pound offensive tackle who was on campus. He's teammates with Marco Linez. And then you have Chris Tarrick, who's 6'6", 295, who was on campus this weekend for a visit. Plus, we're not even bringing up, we mentioned it earlier, but the 6'9", kid from Illinois, Cannon Leonard. I mean, he ain't moving inside at 6'9". So again, it's possible to move some of these guys in the interior, but with their size, specifically height, typically those guys are going to be on the outside unless you move them to the other side of the ball. But it's a good problem to have. I just am still just struggling to see Iowa taking 2 more offensive tackles, but maybe they will.
And it's also a similar skill evaluation and process as guys' skills are evaluated. Guard versus tackle. I'm going to make the correlation between that comparison to a second baseman and a shortstop in baseball. You see a lot of shortstops who played shortstop in high school, but then when they reach a higher level, whether that's professionally or in college, or move to second base, because they're still really good players, but they have for that level a second baseman's arm. They don't have a shortstop's arm. And therefore, as you go up the ladder, the more elite players stay at shortstop, and the guys that are a little bit more limited are moved to second base. Similarly, there with the offensive linemen, you've got bigger, bulkier, slower footed guys typically at guard. The guys at tackle obviously have to backpedal much more. They have to turn their bodies and get on the perimeter to create the pocket. And therefore, as you go up the ranks, your best offensive linemen typically, unless you've got a seriously run oriented offense in high school, your best linemen are on the edges, and then they elevate up, and some of them drop back to a guard position because, like it sounds like, Brandon Sheriff got to the NFL and may not have been quite quick enough to be excellent as a tackle, while he turned out to be one of the best guards in the NFL.
Yeah, and arm length, maybe you mentioned that, but that's certainly a topic because you're talking about playing on the outside. So Lauk, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know his measurements, if you will, with his arms. You watch him on tape, and even again, I like to, especially with offensive line play. I don't believe Don Patterson ever coached offensive line play, but certainly being in the business as long as he did on that side of the ball, he knows a lot about it, a lot more than I do. And it's such a area of the game that's based so much on technique. So I rely on him a lot when Iowa's got offensive line prospects that they're recruiting. And he brought that up with Lauk. Again, you're looking at highlight film, so you can't evaluate a kid fully just from highlight tape. But the question is, can he pass protect? Because he's not seeing Big Ten edge rushers in high school. So there you go. I mean, that's an opportunity. Maybe Lauk, as a 4-star kid, comes in and plays guard early. And here's the other thing that keeps getting brought up. And I know fans like to talk about it, so we might as well bring it up. But Iowa fans, I've heard this for a long time. A lot of Iowa fans, whether they're casual fans or not, believe that Iowa needs to get bigger collectively along the offensive line. And you compare Iowa's, I don't have the numbers. I'd love to go. Maybe I'll do that. That's a project that's actually not that difficult to do. I'll go back and compare Iowa's collective size on average, offensive lineman size on average over the past 5 to 6 years compared to Minnesota or Wisconsin, who have been 2 of the best rushing attacks in the Big Ten Conference, and you could argue in the country. Certainly Ohio State's there as well because of their ridiculously talented skill position players. But I do think that Iowa has given up quite a bit as it relates to size, weight, height. So maybe Iowa now they haven't really said this. They've been asked this question. I know the coaching staff has been asked, are you concerned about getting bigger? Because that's the trend. And I think that's kind of been downplayed. But with recruiting, you're taking all these big tackles. Maybe that's a sign that Iowa just wants to get bigger across the line, Mark. So, maybe Iowa ends up playing maybe Lauk and Proctor and Cale Crow and Logan Howland or, Cannon Leonard. Maybe they all end up seeing the field at the same time. How would Iowa fans like a line of 6'9", 6'6", who plays at center? Maybe, I don't know how big Logan Jones is, probably 6'4", 6'5", and then 6'6", and then like 6'8", Proctor. I mean, that's a pretty big old line. And Proctor, we already know, is 335. Lauk is nearly 300 as it is. And we're not even talking about the guys who are there now. Colby, who's 300 or close to 300.
That may change the recruiting of quarterbacks, meaning they need to be tall enough to stand tall enough in the pocket to
Well, they've got tall enough quarterbacks in Petrus and Carson May, who's I think 6'6" or 6'5". Now they won't be. Linez is 6'2". Iowa typically doesn't recruit real short quarterbacks, as you know. Alex Padilla is a bit shorter, but yeah, it's just interesting. I don't know if it's a sign of a change in philosophy with recruiting, but it does tell me that they're going to have more size than normal if these guys stay true to their word, and especially if you get Proctor and or one of these other two guys.
Corey had a rather interesting tweet based on a response to his one of his videos, and Spark CW is alluding to this, and I found it on your Twitter feed. So, Corey, you can let us know what happened here and what you read into this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I debated even posting it on Twitter because my thought is, am I blowing it way out of proportion? I didn't say anything other than this is what Kaden Proctor's stepdad commented last night on the channel. And, sure, I guess I'm, we always talk about how ridiculous it is that we're so into a 17-year-old's decision. But when you're a 5-star kid, I think we can read into things like this. But yeah, his stepfather, Kevin Perkins, commented. He said, as his stepfather, all I can say is ... Stay tuned. Now, this isn't, I made sure to bring this up. This is an Iowa channel. So I think my guess is that he understands he was commenting on an Iowa channel. If he watched the video, he knows that I'm an Iowa guy, right? Now, maybe he commented that and it means nothing, and Proctor hasn't made his decision yet, or maybe it will be Alabama, but I don't know. I mean, Mark, if you're looking into it from an unbiased perspective, would you say, I mean, if we're going to read into something like this, and then maybe people are going to say it's ridiculous that we're even talking about a comment that his stepdad made on a random YouTube channel, but I would venture to say it's probably, I would probably lean more towards it's a good sign than it's a bad sign, right?
We talk about, and when I say we, I'm not talking about the two of us specifically, but I'm talking about us as the media. We talk about things that are far less significant that are stated by people on social media. So that either means nothing, meaning he is just saying, hey, you're going to have to stay tuned. But if it's going to be read into, it's optimistic on the Iowa side. If you're going to read into it, if it does mean something, if he's trying to convey something, it is on the Iowa side of the line, I would think.
I agree.
Yeah.
And so I won't take it any further than that. I didn't want to make a bigger deal out of it than it is, but I do find it peculiar if you're Kaden Proctor's I keep saying uncle. If you're Kaden Proctor's stepdad, you're excited for your stepson's recruitment and his decision, I'm sure. But I do find it a little odd that you would comment that. I mean, even if that is a sign that, hey, he's going to commit, don't you think that's a bit? What's this comment here?
Laughing at Lemansky.
Corey, Mark, I was scoffed at 4 rant with Corey yesterday. Why rant Lemansky today? On a great live show, it was stated they don't talk playoffs on the Iowa show, followed by laughter by 3. Playoffs should be the goal. You'll have to explain this.
Do you have any idea what this means?
No. You'll have to explain it to me.
We were just doing a USC show. We had a Notre Dame guest on. We were doing something similar to what we do here, where we're going through the opponent's schedule and bringing on media members. So Lemansky is referring to near the end of the conversation. We could have talked forever. We started talking playoff formats and what should be instituted. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm trying to kick these guys off. And I'm like, this is a great conversation. I got to go. They keep going. And I said, I've got an Iowa show like in 1 minute. I got to go. And shoot, I even took my shot. I can't say what I would have to get. It's all on record for everybody to see. I don't know exactly what I stated, but I took a little shot at Iowa football of some sort about the playoffs.
Really? You did? You took a shot at Iowa in the playoffs. Wow. That's okay.
I said I'm going to the Iowa show, and we don't talk playoffs there.
Well, you were coming from a USC show. When's the last time USC has talked about the playoffs? Yeah, that's right. Let's put the shoe on the other foot here. Iowa. Listen, Iowa has been more relevant in playoff talk than USC. Can we establish that? They have absolutely been more relevant in playoff talk than USC.
In a conference championship game in 2015. Coming that close to a playoff spot. Sure.
That's much more relevant than USC.
USC did finish number 3 in the country the next season.
Okay. Well, they weren't in the playoff, right?
No, they were not in the playoff.
Okay. Right. And I don't know you'll have to tell me what the bowl
and I think going forward, there's much more expectation that USC is going to be challenging for playoff spots.
And let's remember, now people are going to laugh at this, but Mark, you and I both talked about this. Even though you might think it's a joke, last season, Iowa was 10-2 heading into that Michigan game.
Mm-hmm.
You beat Michigan. You're 11-2 Big Ten champs. They're in the discussion at that point. Given now they would have needed everything to go right on championship Saturday, and everything did not go right. But had it gone right, they were in the discussion last year.
Yes, correct me if I have this line of conversation wrong, but at some point during the week, you contacted me and said, is it ridiculous for me to think that Iowa can make the playoffs, that there's a scenario out there? And I'm like, I'm already looking at this. I'm already looking to produce a video. Like, I'm already looking at how this is lining up to where Iowa could have a valid argument for a playoff selection. Yes.
No, that's absolutely what happened. And I remember doing a video breaking it down as well. And people can laugh all they want. But as you know, Mark, I don't produce content based on what people are going to find noteworthy or ridiculous versus realistic, because it was realistic. I don't care what anybody else has to say. It was realistic if you look at the scenarios, and I broke it all down in that video. But we do appreciate the super chat from Lemansky.
Yes, we do.
And I do believe that you're right. That I mean, listen, let's just look at the players, the personnel, and what USC brings to the table now with Lincoln Riley. He's obviously proven that he's more concerned with playoffs than Kirk Ferentz is. Is that fair? Lincoln Riley is more concerned with winning a national championship than Kirk Ferentz is. That's been proven. Anybody wants to argue that, prove it to me. I loved it because well, a number of reasons. We won't get into this. This is what we want to be positive today, right, Mark? But that's the truth. But so I do appreciate the super chat, and we've got a super chat from your Oregon Ducks fan as well, Mark.
We do. How does the center rank in the hierarchy on the offensive line? Tackles are typically more athletic than guards, sure, but what makes an elite center in your opinion? Well, the center has the most responsibility by far of all the offensive linemen in terms of recognizing blitzes. Obviously, they have to be the most in sync with the quarterback in regards to the snap count. But they also, if you watch along the offensive line of any college or NFL game, especially the more experienced the center, the more you're going to see this, is they're just pointing, they're looking up, they're pointing all over the place because they're recognizing players shading in different gaps or showing blitz or faking blitz. The offensive line does not get enough credit for a number of reasons. Obviously, they don't compile any statistics. They're the only position on the field that compiles no statistics that are readily available, that people are used to absorbing. And of course, they're only mentioned typically during the broadcast when they make a mistake, they create a penalty, they allow a sack, something like that. But it has to be the most cohesive unit to be successful of any of the units. The linebackers have to work together. The secondary has to work together, but nowhere close to the offensive line. It's so much more difficult. And that's why I think the offensive line coach is the most important position coach of any of the coaches on any coaching staff, typically, all things being equal. But yeah, the center, and I think this has actually been, I don't want to say it's been proven, but there have been indications that the offensive linemen on most, and again, I don't want to state this as some kind of a, like it's been researched to a degree, but it has been reviewed based on education status and so forth, that the offensive linemen, typically the smarter players, the higher IQs, the more educated, eventually educated players play along the offensive line.
You're right. And that's been Iowa's problem. You brought up cohesion, and you know, it's I said the same, this is ironic we're talking about this because I had the same conversation with someone earlier today. It is, if I had to, let's just play this game for a second, Mark. Let me ask you a question, and I want to see how you answer it and see if it's the same way I answered the question. If there was one thing about Iowa football that is the most baffling, what would you say it is? The most baffling
about the current structure and
the Iowa program under Kirk Ferentz. You probably won't answer the same way I did, but I'll explain once you do.
I posted a video like 2 days ago because I received a call on a call-in show concerning Iowa football, and I responded about how Brad Banks is arguably the most successful quarterback
Sure.
in Kirk Ferentz's tenure, and he refuses to recruit and sign another quarterback like him, and
True.
that it makes no sense to me.
But I think
So
let me just defend him for a second. He does have one committed that I think is very much like Brad Banks. But
yeah.
the transfer portal conversation is fair and valid, and that's a fair point. I'll tell you what's most baffling to me, and this is not me ripping him, but this is just what's most baffling to me. The fact that Kirk Ferentz, who has been so successful at Iowa, is going to be a college football Hall of Fame coach, deservedly so. First ballot. I mean, there's no question about it. He's considered to be an offensive line guru. Iowa's produced all these offensive linemen to the NFL. Here's what's baffling. The fact that they consistently can't run the ball. I mean, that is so, I'm not ripping anybody. That is so bizarre. When you weigh all of it, they're winning games. They produce offensive linemen, and your head coach is an offensive line guru, and yet they consistently cannot run the ball.
I believe I've told you this in the past, Corey, that you would win bets or fool outsiders, educated college football fans that are not Iowa fans, about the prowess or lack thereof of the Iowa rushing attack. Iowa is typically discussed and talked about nearly on the plane of a Wisconsin nationally in conversations about the teams that bring the lunch pail and have the offensive line and move the line of scrimmage and run the ball and run it effectively. Iowa gets mentioned all the time.
Yeah.
But it's not the truth.
I know, but all the other variables that we just brought up are reasons to believe that notion if people really don't watch Iowa football or study the statistics. So it is bizarre. And like I say, the big cherry on top is the fact that you have a situation where they're winning a bunch of games. Like Iowa wins quite a few games despite that. Despite having an offense that can't throw and rarely can run. Yet they win games and they produce a ton of offensive linemen and tight ends to the NFL. It's a very odd situation. But again, we kind of come full circle here, and Erica brings it up. Thank you for the super chat, Erica. If we get the O-line sorted out, we would go places. The O-line, they're recruiting a different breed, it seems like right now. At least they're starting to nail down some of these guys. Certainly Proctor changes the conversation completely because he'd be the highest rated recruit in the history of Iowa football. But then you add in the fact that you've got running backs that are of a different breed. So there you go. You've got Jazian Patterson coming in this year. You got Caleb Johnson coming in this year. You got Kendrick Raphael coming in next year. Those are types of guys that Iowa has not been getting on the recruiting trail. And I give a lot of credit to Liddell Betts. I'm sure Tyler Barnes deserves some credit. Perhaps George Barnett deserves a little bit of the credit too, as it relates to just running attack and certainly the offensive line recruiting. And Kirk Ferentz, you got to give Kirk and Brian credit. All right, you got to give them credit where it's due. They're getting these offensive players despite having problems on the offensive side of the ball in general. So, yeah, these are all – it's a bizarre situation, and yet, personnel-wise, I am more confident now than I was a year ago at this time, despite last season and how last season went. Now, that doesn't mean I think that it's going to convert because we know that talent doesn't always convert into results. Look at Ohio State's defense last year. I mean, we could segue into Ohio State if we wanted to. They got talent all across the board on defense, and yet that was not a very good defense. So it doesn't always translate, and I'm still concerned with coaching on the offensive side of the ball. There's a number of concerns I have with game management, clock management. Quarterback play is still a huge question mark. So all those things are I'm not saying that the offensive line and running back recruiting is going to solve Iowa's problems on offense, but it is a conversation that's worth having.
Okay. We appreciate, Erica, your super chat, and everyone else. Thank you so much for that.
Let me just add this in real quick, Mark, before you go on. I don't mean to interrupt you, but Keith brought something up earlier in the chat, and I appreciate Keith being here. But he said that this was in response to our conversation. Iowa is not a playoff team unless it expanded to 12 teams. Iowa doesn't have the talent to win a national championship. I just want to clarify. No, at no time did Mark or myself ever say that Iowa was in position to win a national championship. But the facts are they were in a position in 2015. They were inches away. Had they stopped Michigan State on the goal line, they were inches away from going to the playoff. That is a fact. Okay. There is no question about it. Now, maybe they would have gotten ran off the field against Alabama. That's very possible. The fact of the matter is last year they were number 2 in the country at one point, whether you think that was correct or incorrect. And then when you got to championship weekend, they had won the West, and had they beaten Michigan, they were 11-2, which would have put them in the conversation. That is a fact. So I'm not saying that they have the talent to actually make a playoff, or I shouldn't say that. They obviously have the talent to make a playoff because they've been very close, despite their shortcomings. Because it is possible when you're in a division like the West to get through the West, and then it comes down to one game oftentimes, Mark. If you can take care of business out of conference and you win enough games, maybe just drop one along the way. And last year they had dropped 2 and they still maybe had an outside shot. So Iowa certainly is helped by having the divisions in place, and that's what at least puts them in the conversation on a year in and year out basis. You win the West, you have a chance at the playoff. Even though I don't think it's a priority for Kirk Ferentz.
What kind of odds do you give this program of making a playoff in the next 10 years?
That's a great question. I would love to. I would have to say, maybe this is me and being a homer and being a biased fan. I would have to say I would give it good odds of happening at some point over the next 10 years. But the argument could also be made that who knows where the program's going to head after Kirk Ferentz retires. That's a valid point. But I was very close. I mean, the playoffs been around for what, 8 years now?
Yes.
So Iowa was very close in 15. They have been close since. Not that close, but they've been close. So I wouldn't call that a fluke. Now, maybe you can say it was because of the schedule and how it transpired. But the fact of the matter is they've been somewhat close a couple of times. 2016 was a flop of a year, but they had talent. I think that was one of the more talented teams that didn't accomplish anything like what we expected. George Kittle and Desmond King and CJ Beathard. That was actually a really talented Iowa team. But my point is, I would say maybe slightly over 50%.
Really?
But that's hard. That's hard to. One playoff in the next 10 years. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think so. Is that lower than you anticipated or higher?
Much higher.
Really? So you would put it much lower.
Pretty low chance of making a playoff.
So you just don't have faith in the future of this program, is what you're saying.
Well, that's a lot of faith. That's defining playoff as a 4-team playoff. If it expands to 8 or 12 teams, then that's a different dynamic. But my confidence level of teams in the Big Ten making the playoff are the obvious Ohio State, Michigan. But if you lined up the teams in the Big Ten, the good teams in the Big Ten, and asked me my level of confidence in them reaching a playoff in the next 10 years, even though Iowa has been and still is, as of this show right now, a better program than Nebraska, I would tend to think,
oh gosh,
it would be a tough call. But I just see Nebraska doing things that seem to be pushing the program. Now, this is just in the off season.
Yeah,
nothing's been proven on the field, but they seem to have an approach to say, we are going for it.
That's because they're desperate, Mark. That's because Scott Frost is going to get canned if they don't. That's the fact. Scott Frost, if they don't do something different, listen, they had an exile of players as well. Okay. And it wasn't working as the change at the offensive coordinator spot, the slew of players they brought in the transfer portal. This is do or die year for Scott Frost. It ain't do or die for Kirk Ferentz. And if it were do or die for Kirk Ferentz, he'd probably walk away before he'd make all the changes that Nebraska has made, and to each his own. But I'm just saying, I agree with you that I think Nebraska's got a shot, and I think Scott Frost is smart enough to know this is his only shot to give Nebraska a shot. He had to go out on a limb and make these moves, but I wouldn't say, I'm not real confident just because he's laying it all out in the portal that's going to translate. Maybe it will, but maybe it won't. So they're just totally, of course, Cole's happy. Yeah, they're just totally different programs because they operate in totally different fashions. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm just saying the consistency of Kirk Ferentz, diss it or not, and I've been critical, you and I have been critical of some facets of the program, but it keeps them perennially in a top 25 position. And at
Mhm.
times they sneak into the top 10, which puts them in the conversation.
Yeah, I have a more difficult time on this show than the other 9 or 10 that I do, because I have a high level of respect for Kirk Ferentz. But it seems as though I'm highly critical of the way he runs the program. I guess what I'm not stating, and I think you're in the same position, is the given that he is running it at a certain level, and that's a high level. We are just addressing those issues and those points in which it could be improved and focusing on that.
Yeah. I think that is fair. The bottom line is Kirk Ferentz there's aspects of what he's done here over the past 23 years that are disappointing to me. And, anybody that wants to argue that, are we saying he's perfect? Like, there's things that I do on a daily basis that uh, I need to do a lot better, as you would, not only with work but with life. That's just the nature of it. And
Sure.
look, Kirk Ferentz is making $7 million a year. He's going to have the spotlight on him, and I think you take the criticism when you're a public employee like that. So, um, anyways, I think it's an interesting conversation. I, I I disagree with you on the whole Nebraska Iowa odds of them. I mean, they haven't even been to a bowl game in how long, Mark? So that's
6 years.
yeah. I mean, well, that's significant. I mean, we're talking about a program that we're discussing in the playoff conversation, and they can't make a bowl game. Iowa hasn't not qualified for a bowl game since what, 2012. I mean, there's a big difference between what Nebraska puts out there on a weekly basis in Iowa. So I'll take umbrage to that assessment, Mark.
No, I'm making a complete projection. I'm making it. See, if you also had made the statement, or I had brought this tack to the conversation, I had brought this approach, who am I more confident is going to have a winning record in the next 10 years? I would say Iowa. Absolutely.
Sure, I
Iowa.
get you.
I am making the ceiling and the floor, I'm compressing it for Iowa.
I know
And I think it's broader. It's more of a wild card for Nebraska.
the floor is much lower, and maybe the ceiling is much higher, but they haven't proven that. They have not proven that the ceiling is much higher. Iowa has proven that the ceiling might be a little higher than you think because of how the divisions are set up. Now, it's a good question by Trosper here. If the divisions are done away with, and I move those odds down, well down, Mark.
Yeah, because the 8 year um, the 8 year history of the two divisions, and I went through this and posted a video, would eliminate like 3/4 of the Western Division.
Yeah, and that's a scary thought if you're an Iowa fan. Now, again, it hasn't mattered because Iowa hasn't. It has mattered. They have won division titles, but I don't even think people like you consider that to be a real title, do you, Mark? A West Division title, like you
I
don't think they
don't,
should
but I'm
hang
not
a
going to make
banner?
fun of a program or a team that does. I just personally don't, because I think
Yeah,
it's the Big Ten conference.
I get you. No, I have no problem with that. And a lot of Iowa fans are. We don't talk about this much, but like a lot of Iowa fans are just to the point where they just won a Big Ten championship. They feel like in year 23, we need a Big Ten championship. Like it's enough with the West titles, enough with the 8-4, 9-3. Got to win a Big Ten title. I don't even hear a lot of playoff talk. But the thing about it is, right now with how the divisions are set up, if you win a Big Ten title, you got a good chance of making the playoff. Not guaranteed, because it wasn't guaranteed last year if they had beaten Michigan, and it's certainly not guaranteed if they go 9-3 and then go 10-3 by winning the Big Ten championship, which I think is possible. I think they can win the West this year. We've talked about this. I think they can win the West this year at 9-3, given the schedules for Wisconsin and Minnesota out of division. I think you could have some mediocre records, or at least average to slightly above average records at the top of the West Division this year because of how the schedules are made up. I don't remember a year where maybe the three best teams in the division all had difficult schedules. It either seems like Iowa has an easy schedule and Wisconsin's tough, or Wisconsin's easy and Iowa's tough. Purdue's the dark horse. I know we've talked about them in the past, but Yeah, no, this is an interesting conversation to have, and I have no problem. I have no problem with the take that USC certainly has. I mean, I would put USC probably in my top 8 favorites this year to make the college football playoff. Is that fair? Given what they've done in the transfer portal at quarterback with the coaching staff and whatnot.
Yeah, it's fair. And considering the conference they play in, I don't think they have one of the 8 best teams in the country, but
yeah. But again,
yeah.
it's not all. That's what people need to realize, and that's my only argument with Keith, and I respect his opinion. But we have to weigh the fact that we're not talking about total talent. We're not talking about evaluating Iowa versus some other random team in the SEC. No, we're talking about where they're playing right now. They're playing in the West Division of the Big Ten Conference. You win your division, you go to the Big Ten championship game, which gives you one game to win a conference championship, and usually a conference champion ends up in the playoff. That's how things have worked. So you don't want divisions to go away if you're Iowa. I mean, Reed, I don't know what the latest on that is, Mark. I really don't follow it as much as you. Where are we with the division talk? I keep hearing tweets about it and information about the Big Ten trying to restructure, but where are we right now with that discussion?
Well, nothing else has been discussed, but the Pac-12 made its announcement about 6 weeks ago that it's abolishing divisions. It's going with a 1 versus 2 seeding starting this fall in 2022. And I don't want to state this as 100% guarantee because I haven't looked into it, but we've got a couple of different ACC shows on Wednesday night. But the ACC had adopted a 3-5-5 system to its scheduling. I'm not going to explain that right now to people that aren't up to date on what that is. But in that, they just this morning announced what those 3 common opponents or rivalry games would be that would be the set teams for each team in the conference each year. And with that, I saw a note on Twitter, and again, I haven't looked into it, that they are abolishing divisions starting in 2023. So that would be 2 of the 5 conferences have already overturned that the division format and gone to just a 1 through 12 or 1 through 14 format. So it's
Mark,
a pretty strong trend.
Let me just thank you, Cole, for this. Nebraska has the mindset of winning it all. Kirk doesn't. That might be true. I have no problem with that comment. Keith, I don't think you understand my point. That's exactly what I'm saying. The fact that they play in a weaker division actually helps their cause because so much emphasis is placed on conference championships. So you win your division, even if it's a weaker division, you somehow knock off. You have an opportunity that the other West teams don't have to actually win one game, the Big Ten championship game, and possibly get into the playoffs. So that's precisely my point, Keith. I'm not saying that they have a better chance because they play in a tough division. It's the weaker of the 2 divisions, which gives them an opportunity, even though it's the weaker of the 2 divisions in a conference that's perceived to be at least the second best conference in the country. That's my point. So I think we're on the same page. Mark, do we want to talk Ohio State today, or do we want to save this for next week? Because we had a guest. I understand your guest canceled kind of late. Had something come up.
Yeah, folks, as we have marched through the 2022 schedule and brought on media guests representing the opponents, and we hope to get to every opponent, and we've hit roughly half the schedule, and we had planned to talk Ohio State this week, but our guest from his outlet was not able to make it, apparently not able to make it. I don't think he's too optimistic at this point. He had sent me something 45 minutes ago to say it, not looking great.
Well, Mark, do you want me to run through? Do you want me to
Sure.
run through for anybody that's not aware of? I can run through who was on campus yesterday, or excuse me, this past weekend. Does that work?
Absolutely.
So I ran through this yesterday on the show. Certainly, if anybody's got a question,
and you guys will have that all over this discussion with Ohio State.
Ohio State guy
until that game's played, and it's no given that Ohio State's going to win this year.
You know what? I'll tell you, and we'll save some of this for the discussion with whoever we get on for the Ohio State show. But if I'm Ohio State and Ryan Day, I am absolutely using the 2017 game. Absolutely. Why would you not? Like, we're talking about a team that actually may have problems getting up for Iowa, right? I mean, you could argue.
would
My
hope
point
not.
is Wisconsin, Minnesota, Purdue, they're not going to have problems getting up for Iowa because they're rivals in the division. Ohio State doesn't perceive Iowa to be anywhere close to Ohio State level of football. So my point is, if you're Ryan Day, you absolutely use everything you can to get your kids up for each and every week. And that's the obvious, right? These guys kicked our butts last time we played. Let's show them what Ohio State football is all about. So I'm just saying, if Ryan Day is a smart man, I believe he is, I think he will use that as motivation. But this past weekend, let me run through some of these visits. So Kaden Proctor is number 1 on the list at 6'8", 335, 5-star. Everybody knows about him. We're awaiting a decision. It's down to him in Alabama. Trevor Lauk committing to Iowa. We talked about that earlier at 6'6", 287, a 4-star tackle for the class of 2023. We did get news this morning that Jerron Tibbs, a 6'4", 193-pound receiver from the Indianapolis area, committed to Purdue over Iowa, so that's significant. Iowa does have a commit for 2023. Alex Moda from Eastern Iowa, but they could have used Tibbs' services. And Purdue, once again, taking a receiver from Iowa. They've done it with Tyrone Tracy. They've done it with Charlie Jones, and we even go back to the recruitment of David Bell. And for good reason. I tweeted that earlier this afternoon. Like, anybody that wants to argue that a recruit is smarter to go to Iowa to play wide receiver than Purdue is on a strong form of methamphetamine. And that's just a fact. Like, I'm an Iowa fan. I wish it wasn't true. But Mark, come on. A receiver? Where would you rather play if you're an elite receiver? Purdue or Iowa? Is that really a discussion?
No, it's not even close.
It's not even close. I understand people being homers, and I am too, but that's just a fact. Kenneth Merriweather, a defensive end out of Detroit. He was on campus at 6'3", 235. These are all 23 guys. The rest of the guys I'm going to read are all 3-stars, so I won't bore you with that. But he is, I've heard good things about his visit. Wouldn't be surprised to see a commitment from him soon. Asa Newsom, an Iowa kid, wouldn't be surprised to see him commit as well. He's a linebacker athlete from the state of Iowa. Mentioned Logan Howland, plays at the Hun School out in New Jersey with Marco Linez. So he's coached by Tony Rassiopi, but he's an offensive tackle at 6'7", 280. Kendrick Gilbert, 6'5", defensive end, was on campus. Chris Tarek, a 6'6", 295-pound tackle, was on campus. Safety Khalil Tate at 6'1", 185. Zach Ortworth, tight end, who Iowa does need a tight end. They got 2 on campus this weekend. At 6'5", 220. Trevor Boer, a 6'4", 265-pound defensive tackle, was on campus. George Burhen, I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly, at 6'5", 215, a tight end. Jordan Allen, a 6'4", 240-pound defensive end. And one guy that I missed last night on the show that I believe was on campus, this is at least according to 247 Sports, Joe Otting. So Joe Otting, don't know as much about Joe Otting, but he is projected, according to 247 Sports. According to 247 Sports, he is committed to Notre Dame. That just happened. Let's see. So I don't know if he came here after his visit. Yeah, so he officially visited. He committed to Notre Dame on the 7th of June. Visited Iowa on the 24th, according to 247 Sports. He's a 6'4" interior offensive lineman. So, again, I'm no recruiting guru, Mark, but usually you don't love when guys visit other schools after they've committed, right? I'm not wrong in saying that, correct?
I don't think that's unusual.
For an official visit? Again, I'm not as big of you've been around the game much longer than I have. It seems like Kirk Ferentz and the Hawks don't love when guys visit other schools after being committed. I just don't know.
And I've actually even heard from Dabo Sweeney that they don't allow it. Now, I don't know how they
Iowa
don't
didn't at one
allow
time.
it,
Yeah.
but they basically say, if you're going to commit to us, there's no reason to visit other schools. Therefore, committing means you are not visiting other schools. So it's not that it's uncommon, but it's also not uncommon for recruits to commit to a school and still go see other schools.
So I guess that's my point. According to this, Joe Otting was on campus this weekend at Iowa. So now he's a 3-star, interior offensive lineman from Topeka, Kansas. Had a laundry list of really strong offers, including Iowa State, Notre Dame, Baylor, etc. And then Iowa did have some guys who were already committed to other schools. According to this, again, I'm going off of 247 Sports, Jamison Patton, Ankeny kid who committed to Iowa State. According to this, he was on the Iowa campus. And then Audrey Davis, 6'4" wide receiver from Kansas State, had visited as well. And Kai Black, who's a wide receiver. So I don't know. They didn't get Tibbs. Is it possible to get somebody to flip? Maybe. I initially did not see those guys that they were on according to Rivals. I didn't see that on there, but if 247 is accurate, then they were. And then a few guys that were let's see here. Let me pull this up. That are already committed to Iowa that were there. John Nestor, safety corner out of Chicago, was on campus. Aiden Hall, who's committed athlete from Harlan, Iowa, he visited as well. And Chase Brackney, from defensive end from Colorado, was there. Leighton Jones, future center at 6'4", 250 from Indiana. He was there, helped in the Lauk recruitment. And then Alex Moda, mentioned him, the wide receiver from Marion. So, yeah, they had a lot of guys. Maybe you get a flip. They need somebody. I think they need help at tight end and wide receiver. I mean, they've got Alex Moda, but you certainly, they're going to be targeting a tight end, no question about it. And I think at least another wide receiver in that class. But it seems like they've really prioritized getting bigger on the offensive line. And they've got a number of athletes from Iowa for the 23 and 24 classes. They got work to do, but I've heard good things about the rest of this week. I know there's a bunch of Iowa recruits that keep implying that there's good news coming. I believe that to be true. If you had to put a gun in my head, I'd say Kaden Proctor's a Hawkeye, not just because of the comment from his stepdad, but I do believe that how we talked about this last week before he even set foot on campus, and I did hear the visit went well, but I think he's a Hawkeye, so we'll wait and see.
As Dave mentions here, it is a big deal for kids to take the opportunity to see all these places. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So, yeah, I have seen examples of both, and I don't know what the split is, but it's neither uncommon nor common for various programs to shut down visits going forward after a commitment.
Yeah, and Arona Stahl says Otting was not in Iowa last weekend. So again, conflicting reports, unless maybe 247 Sports is not up to date, and these guys who had committed other places, maybe they ended up not visiting. That's very possible. I'm just going by what it lists on 247 Sports. But the guys that I read earlier were on campus. So I mean, that's I think I counted 13 guys who were uncommitted. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I believe that's 13. 13 guys that were that are uncommitted. Well, not Tibbs. He of course committed to Purdue this morning. So, anyways, yeah, lots of storylines to follow here in June and July, and this is the time of year for this. I mean, when you have a bunch of visits but this is potentially a historic weekend if it results in a Kaden Proctor announcement. Now, it will be interesting to see how Proctor goes about announcing, because I'd speculated, would he maybe lend his hand to Iowa over the weekend? But a kid of this stature, what percentage of kids that are in the top 10, Mark, in recruiting rankings, what percentage of them go live on ESPN? Or, I mean, a lot of them go live on CBS Sports headquarters, which is online, but what percentage of them go live on a national network?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for you, because the number of times that I've tuned in for those, the next one that I tune into would be the first. So I don't pay any attention to that, which I know I sometimes state things that go completely against what I've chosen to do here, but I just have no interest in, I'll find out online. So I don't know. I know it's becoming more common, of course.
And Arona, no news from me on Kendrick Gilbert. Again, a couple of these guys, I had heard good things, Bearweather being one. And I have had other people bring up 247 Sports and their crystal balls and whatnot. I really don't follow the crystal balls as much as some people do. I just don't. And there's sometimes things on message boards that people bring up to me, and out of respect for those paywalls, that I mean, those people are running a business.
Mm-hmm.
I I don't like repeating those things because that's information that,
Sure.
that those media outlets
Yep.
are putting out. So I don't want to repeat that information, but I have heard good things about a couple other recruits. So we'll just have to wait and see. According to, I can tell you this is a free information from 247, at least what they have, that all those kids are, besides Burhen, are quote unquote warm with Iowa. So I'm assuming that's just what they give you official visit there, considered a warm recruit as opposed to a cool one, although Burhen is listed as cool. So anyways, that's where we're at right now. Mark, is there anything I'm missing from the past week? I saw you did by the way, great video. I love the fact that you jumped on when Lauk committed. I enjoyed that myself. I listened to that video as I was out in the putting green, and I had it going on the green on loud as I was practicing putting. It was enjoyable. So thank you for that.
Well, it probably only took you through like one putt. It wasn't.
It wasn't a long one. No.
It wasn't some 20-minute dissertation. Just
no, it was good. It held our listeners in check, and it gave, because sometimes it takes me a while. And I'll tell you, like Thursday, I'm not, I'm not as. This is your full-time gig, Mark, and I respect what you do.
Have other things going on.
I've got other things going on, and so if I Thursday, I produce
a golf game. Apparently,
well, that's an example of something that maybe not real important. But Thursday, I had 3 videos, and that takes a while. I mean, when you're putting these, you're quick at it, you're good at it, but it took a while to produce those videos. So, when you have all this news coming, I'm kind of relieved that Proctor has not committed because it's going to put me on the pedestal, certainly, to be live, and that's great. No, I'm happy to do it, but I think I still believe we're going to get some really good news here soon.
I was gone all day on Sunday. I got back here. It might have been 8 or 8:30 at night, and just checked out, as I typically do a couple times a day. I will just look at 2023 commits, and I was just counting up the commits coming in for various channels that we run, and so I just ripped through them. I must have posted 8 videos, just one after another.
It reminded me of. Thank you for Lemansky for this super chat. Love the show. Go Hawks. Following the USC channel too. Thank you, Lemansky. But it reminded me, Mark, of It reminded me of Mark Rogers, like 2018, right, or 19. When did you start the channel?
The Iowa channel?
No, your channel.
Oh, way before then.
Way before. So back when you used to really hit recruiting pretty hard back in the day from a national perspective. Didn't you tell me that you attempted to interview every single commit for every single Power 5 team? Am I wrong on that?
I would go through the National 300 and I would contact everybody on Twitter in the top 300. And then I would go outside of that to,
listen, that's impressive. Okay, that's
Is
impressive.
It really?
Oh, because I contact a lot of these athletes, and it's hard. It's hard to get 17-year-olds to respond to messages and to actually come through. And no, I'll say this: a lot of these guys that I've had on recently, they are tremendous young athletes. About Marco Linez, but it's hard to get recruits with these interviews.
Well, and because they're 17 years old, many of them are have good intentions. But when they say, "Hey, yeah, I'll do it after school," and then you try to figure out a time, and then you throw a time and a date at them, and they're just like, "Yeah, that's cool," and it's like 3 days later, and they have no idea what they committed themselves to.
Right.
So that happened all over the place. But it was funny because you mentioned a name. This was probably 6 months ago, of a name of a quarterback recruit at Iowa that I had long since forgot. Yes. That I thought that name sounds familiar. Then I was like, "Oh yeah."
I looked it up and I watched that interview after the fact. Yes, Mark.
But these days you're doing far better than I am with your recruiting.
I've got a far more narrowed outlook on my profession. Erica, did we miss Erica's super chat?
Yes.
Well, not this one, but the other one. But thank you for this one as well, Erica. Reminding everybody hit the like button. I can throw it up here. The other one, Mark. Maybe you did put this one up there. She's saying being critical doesn't mean you're not a fan, Mark. So,
yes, my Iowa fandom is legendary.
I was going to say, well, for Mark, I know it's not a cause-effect relationship, but you're not really you're not at all a fan, right? Although, let's be honest, from a business perspective, the better Iowa does, the better it is for your channel. That's not, nobody's going to argue that. And that doesn't mean you're going to be rooting for Iowa over whoever, but that's a fact. It's the same fact for me. I was very fortunate starting this YouTube channel. I've been podcasting for years, as you know, but starting this YouTube channel last year, you've got Iowa winning the Big Ten tournament. You've got Iowa football winning the West. I mean, those are pretty good things to have happen. The Penn State game was a monster game from a national perspective, given the fact that it was a top 5 matchup. So thankful for what we've got here, Mark.
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. And I've got to credit a lot of fan bases out there for tolerating me, because I don't think in a sense they know what to do with somebody who runs these channels highlighting these teams and has no interest or rooting interest in it, because they're just not used to that, because they'll name off all these other outlets that they watch and listen to, and they're all fans. And, you know, you're a journalist, but also a fan of Iowa football. And certainly don't apologize for that, you attack it from a journalistic, analytical view, but you are rooting for Iowa as hard as anyone.
And I don't consider myself, and I appreciate you saying, I don't consider myself necessarily to be a journalist as it relates to Iowa football, for the record. Yeah. I have accepted the fact that I'm a fan, but we've talked about this before. There's a lot of media people, and I'm not going to name anybody specifically. There are a lot of media people who are cheerleaders for the Iowa program. And I'm sure that's the case everywhere. I know Nebraska's got a whole slew of them that just worship Big Red. And I mean, like, I've heard stories, you go into the press box at Nebraska and they're like standing up with their hand over their heart for the fight song, you know, something ridiculous, I don't know. That's what I've heard. So there's some people in Iowa media that are very passionate about Iowa football. You know, I remember covering an Iowa game in the press box years ago, and there are some people that sort of cheer, like media people that cheer in the press box. And I was a fan, but I was covering the game as a media member. I couldn't bring myself to do that. And so I guess my point is, for me, I have a hard time understanding why some certain media people aren't more objective. Just seems like, you know, you're not getting paid by the university. At least I don't think you are, unless you got an NIL deal as well. I even though I'm a fan, I find myself being critical, but that doesn't mean I'm any less of a fan. So I appreciate that from Erica.
You explaining all that brought me back to the year 1998. Quick story. I'm at the NCAA tournament, and Bryce Drew Valparaiso hits a shot against Ole Miss. Big upset.
You were at that game
every year. And I'm at the game. I'm on press row. I'm right behind the coaches. I'm on media row. And as soon as he hit that shot, I stand up. I'm just thinking, I got to, you know, go to the locker room. I got to go to the news conference. I got to cut these videos. I got to be on for the 6 o'clock news. And they were like, all the other media people that I typically hung out with were like, they were Mississippi people. You know, they worked, you know, for the Jackson newspaper or the whatever, the Tupelo, you know, NBC station. And they were all like crushed. And I get up and I remember one of them grabbing me by the arm, because I'm just matter-of-factly walking. He's like, you don't even care about that, do you? I said, absolutely not. I could care less.
Oh, well, that's the way it sort of should be, in my opinion. But that's not the reality of how sports media is covered nowadays. So
sure. Well, Corey, I know you got to go, and we have hit our 1 hour mark. So we appreciate everybody being here. Good crowd today, and very nice. Thank you. Appreciation shown to the channel. Thank you so much, everyone. Lemansky, Erica, and others. Thank you for that. And be back here, everyone, next Tuesday at 4:30 Central. Another edition of Hawkeyes Live. And again, bring your friends, your family, your social media acquaintances along with you as well.
And one more reminder, Mark, for anybody that's interested in sponsoring the show, reach out to either Mark or myself. Not hard to do. We got lots of ways to contact us.
And again, get on over from the Hawkeye of the Storm as well. That Kaden Proctor announcement may come sooner rather than later. We shall see. All right, Corey, thanks so much.